I don't like horror movies. In fact, I never really liked anything horror-related. The feeling of fear simply doesn't appeal to me. As a teenager, whenever friends would invite me to watch scary films, I'd often say I'd seen enough as a kid, and they just didn't faze me anymore. But that wasn't the whole truth. There was one thing, a strange VHS I watched at my grandma's house when I was a kid, that haunted me. It wasn't like the other cartoons or shows I'd seen. This VHS had a bizarre mix of cartoon and live-action scenes that left a lasting impression. If I had to guess, I'd say it came from the 1920s or 1930s. I'd occasionally ask my friends if they'd seen anything like it, and they'd give me a look of recognition. After all, who hasn't seen an old black and white cartoon? But as I kept describing it, their expressions slowly shifted from recognition to confusion. What I remembered seemed too strange. A man, egg-shaped, walking down a road with his arms waving about wildly. A swan with a neck that swayed back and forth to music that sounded like pure static, accompanied by a trumpet. Then, interspersed between these odd scenes, there were flashes of live-action footage. The audio was mostly static, except for one moment, the screaming man. I realized then that what I was describing sounded nonsensical, like a dream that had deep meaning to me, but no one else. People would just shrug and suggest I was talking about Roger Rabbit. But no, this was not Roger Rabbit. Regardless, I loved going to my grandma's house as a kid. My mom would drop me off on Saturday mornings and pick me up on Sunday. I had the whole weekend to enjoy with Grandma. She had a garden full of fruits and vegetables, and Saturdays were spent helping her out there. Tomatoes especially were something I would never touch at home, but fresh ones from her garden were delicious. Then, there were the trips to the mall, which were the highlight of my weekend. I loved going into candy stores where she'd always buy me a small bag of gummy worms. Afterward, we'd go clothes shopping, and I'd always groan, trying to convince her I didn't need anything new. As the evening came, we'd return to her house. Grandma always went to bed early, and to keep me entertained, she'd send me to the couch and turn on the old TV. She'd pick a VHS tape from the shelf, the one specifically for me, the strange footage I was now starting to associate with my time there. At the time, I was just a kid, and I went along with whatever routine Grandma had. She'd put the VHS in the VCR, pat me on the head, and head off to bed. I'd sit there, eagerly hoping that tonight would be different, that something else would be on the screen. But no, the old flickering TV would start, and the same images would appear. An egg-shaped man, his arms flailing as he walked down a white road, the swan bobbing its neck in time with the unsettling trumpet music. And then, it always happened. The transition from animation to something much more real. A human skull filling up the screen. That was the part that always terrified me. The skull had hollow eye sockets and a mouth in a grotesque, excited grin. I'd always jump, no matter how ready I thought I was. The static noise in the background made everything worse as the camera zoomed out to reveal the full skeletal figure. I always expected the skeleton to suddenly leap to life, to talk, or to move toward me. At that moment, I'd hug my knees tightly, too afraid to get up. The house was dark, and the idea of walking through the darkness to turn off the TV seemed even worse. I felt trapped. The lights were off, and I couldn't bring myself to move, as if something might happen if I disrupted the scene. Then the animation would return, this time a bow-legged skeleton dancing in an endless loop, joined by the swan, the egg-shaped man, and a mummy unwrapping itself. The bizarre dancing would go on for what felt like forever, until the music stopped, replaced only by the sound of static popping. And then, the live-action sequence would come again, with a man covered in blood screaming, "No! Please, no!" The camera zoomed in on his face, too close for me to understand what was happening, but the sound of his scream still haunted me. I would cry at this point, wishing I could escape this loop of horror. When the animation returned, the mummy was gone, replaced by an image of him hanging by his own bandages, swaying slightly. A title card appeared, "The End." That was when I'd finally fall asleep, but it was never a peaceful sleep. I'd wake up on the couch in the morning, always pretending I had fallen asleep there on my own. Sundays were spent quietly at Grandma's house, drawing pictures with crayons. My mom would eventually come to pick me up, and the cycle would repeat. I didn't think much about the strange VHS tape until it was time for Grandma to go to bed. One day when I was a little older, I realized I hadn't seen Grandma in a long time. I asked my mom about her, and she told me Grandma was busy with her own life. As a child, I accepted that answer without question, though I did miss her. It wasn't until years later at 36 that I went back to that house. My grandma had passed away, and my mom gave me a key to take a walk through the house. I felt an odd mix of excitement and fear as I stood in the doorway, recalling the memories of my childhood. The house felt smaller than I remembered. I went through the familiar rooms, even sat on the same couch where I'd watched those terrifying tapes. But when I searched for that VHS, I couldn't find it. I looked through the shelves, the drawers, even under the bed. It wasn't there. Then in a moment of curiosity, I noticed something odd. A picture frame on the wall, low to the ground, hiding two small holes in the wall behind it. When I looked through them, I saw the old couch and TV, the same setup I had witnessed as a child. A chill ran down my spine. I couldn't help but think back to the child I once was, sitting there on that couch, too scared to move, too trapped in the images on the screen. And now, as an adult, I realized the true horror of it all. That little boy, desperate for escape, knew he would never find the rescue he sought. Yup, just about as crazy as the title sounds. My dad was what they call a macho man. He only wanted sons and lived and breathed for another Keller boy. When my older brother Anthony was born, he was ecstatic. 3 years later, when my mom was pregnant with twins, he was thrilled. But when my brother David and I came into the world and he saw I was a girl, his joy turned into despair. From that moment on, I was always his least favorite. He never hid that from me. While he named my brothers Anthony and David, names that meant priceless and beloved, he named me Lilith, meaning night monster. Though my brothers and mom tried to call me Lily to soften the blow, my dad insisted on calling me Lilith so I could feel the disappointment he felt the day I was born. His dislike for me only grew over time, especially after my parents divorced when I was just 2. He got full custody of us, and things only worsened from there. When he took Anthony and David out to eat or to the movies, I was left behind. He spent all his time with my brothers playing sports, something I actually wanted to join. But being a girl meant I was always excluded. And then, when I was 4, my dad got cancer. It was supposed to be terminal, but that's when everything took a turn. He made a deal with Satan, 15 more years of life in exchange for the soul of one of his children. And surprise, surprise, he chose me. So once I die, my soul would be claimed, no matter how good or bad I was. The first time something unusual happened to me was a month after my dad made that deal. I was in my small room, struggling to sleep on a bed I'd outgrown, while my dad and brothers were downstairs. That's when I saw it, a pale, gaunt demon with sunken eyes and a gaping mouth, its bony fingers clutching the door of my closet. I cried out for my dad, but he stormed upstairs and gave me a beating for disturbing his movie night. After that, he locked me in my room, calling me a baby for being afraid. The demon, however, didn't leave. It just stood there watching me. That was the beginning of many more nights like this. Sometimes the demon would sit in my closet, sometimes it would hover above my bed, and sometimes it would stare at me through the window with glowing red eyes. But eventually, I stopped being scared. One night, when I was 9, the demon stepped out of the closet for the first time. It was huge, taller than the ceiling. It bent its neck unnaturally to fit under the roof. I should have been terrified, but for some reason I wasn't. I just went back to reading my book, and we locked eyes for a while. It wasn't scary, just awkward. Later that night, my dad came in, yelling at me, and the demon just watched, silent. My dad slapped me across the face and left, but the demon stayed by my bed. It was the first time I felt like I wasn't alone. I was crying, but the demon just sat there silently watching. From then on, I welcomed the demons, especially the gaunt one, who I started calling Papa. He was always there for me, especially when my dad was at his worst. When I was 14, things got even worse. I was upset because the boy I liked, Jacob, didn't invite me to the Valentine's dance. On top of that, My dad threw a chair at me. I ran to my room, and there was Papa crouched by the closet. I ran to him, crying, and he did something surprising. He hugged me back, his icy cold hands wrapped around me, and though I should have been terrified, I felt love. For the first time, I had a dad who cared. But then came the fateful night. I was reading To Kill a Mockingbird for a school project when I made a mistake. Papa was curious, so I read aloud to him. I guess I was being too loud because my brother David opened the door. He screamed and my dad came running up. He saw Papa and froze. My dad ran off to get holy water, and I tried to run with Papa, but he stopped me. We both knew it was too late. When my dad returned, he sprayed Papa with holy water, and Papa let out a blood-curdling scream before fading away. I collapsed on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. My dad stood over us, embracing my brothers, saying, "It can't hurt us anymore, sons." But then, something much larger appeared behind my dad. A massive horned figure. It was Satan, the one who had made the deal with my father. Satan turned to my dad and said, "We had a deal, Stanley. I granted you 15 more years of life on 2 conditions. 1, that I get your daughter upon her death, and 2, that you never harm anyone again." My dad pleaded, saying it was a misunderstanding, but Satan wasn't buying it. "You've broken your promise, Stanley, and you've lied to me," he boomed. "I'm breaking off the deal." Satan then turned to me and said there was one way to save my father. If I forgave him, he could live. My dad turned to me, desperately pleading, "Come on, Lily, I'm your dad. Don't you love me? Please forgive me." But I wasn't fooled. I looked at the lifeless body of Pop on the floor and then back at my dad. "My dad is dead, bitch. You killed him," I said coldly. "I don't forgive you." With that, Satan dragged my dad down to the netherworld. My brothers and I could hear his screams as they faded into the distance, and we knew he could never hurt me again. As my brothers cried over the loss of their dad, I walked back to Papa's body and kissed his forehead. "Goodbye, Papa. Thank you." I'm going to get straight to the point. Monsters are real, all of them. You might think you know a lot about them, but trust me, you don't. The stories and legends, they've got it all wrong. I've had the privilege of learning the truth about them. For starters, no self-respecting vampire is going to stand at your door waiting for an invite. And shapeshifters? They don't change once a month to howl at the moon. That's just ridiculous. And all those popular monsters you know, they're just the tip of the iceberg. But there's one thing the stories got right. Teeth. Sharp, crowded, tall, tiny. They all have them, and sometimes they need attention. A monster without teeth loses a huge percentage of its scare factor in an instant. And trust me, monsters pay handsomely to avoid that. That thing that's haunted your nightmares, the one with too many teeth? Yeah, it's real, and probably in a lot of pain. My name is Dr. Dana Danworth, and I run a dental practice specifically for the paranormal. It's not what I expected when I went to dental school. There are days I find myself elbow deep in some of the most disgusting mouths you've ever seen, but the money's good. More than good, actually. But there's a risk involved, and I was reminded of that last night during an appointment with a new patient. It left me shaken, which in my line of work doesn't happen often. Some of my patients can at least pretend to be human for a little while. To the outside world, my practice looks like any other dentist's office. But this patient, not so much. He needed the cover of darkness, which meant an overnight appointment. Coco, my receptionist, booked him in. I love her. She's a true friend, but she's awful at the basics of her job. She never collects the relevant details for new patients. It's frustrating, but she's been with me from the start, and I can't just fire her. Besides, she's a great person. Mr. Urastics was booked for 11 p.m. He wanted to come under the cover of darkness. That was all Coco knew. I prepped the room, trying to shake off the unease building in my stomach. Then came the sound of the buzzer, signaling his arrival. Coco unbolted the door, but before she could open it, she was knocked flat on her back. The door swung wide open, and I heard a high-pitched voice behind me, right by my ear. "Nice to meet you, doctor. My name is Mosaf Urastics. You can call me Mo if you prefer." I turned around and saw him. He wasn't a huge, hairy beast like I expected, but a humanoid figure in a long, hooded cloak. However, he had a fleshy face with red irises and pupils shaped differently than a human's. Over his eyes was a thin, translucent layer of skin, almost like an eyelid that never fully separated. His mouth had no visible lips. Instead, there was a thin layer of skin that stretched over his circular jaw, revealing rows of small, razor-sharp teeth. His voice came from deep within his throat, filtered through the skin. While most people would have been terrified, I was fascinated. I'd never seen anything like Mo before. The curiosity outweighed the fear. I greeted him, and after some awkward back and forth, I led him to the treatment room. He explained his problem. His teeth were dull. They were meant for something, but they'd lost their edge. As I examined his mouth, it became clear that this wasn't a regular case. Mo revealed that his diet consisted of brains. No, he wasn't a zombie. He made it clear that he was far worse than that. He ate brains, but his teeth weren't up to the task. That's where I came in. Mo wanted me to sharpen them. I was curious, so I asked more about him. I had to understand what I was dealing with, especially since he wasn't the typical monster I dealt with. He told me his skin would shed, and he would consume it. This, I knew, was similar to geckos shedding their skin, but in Mo's case, it wasn't so simple. I proceeded with the treatment, using a scalpel to remove some of the excess skin, revealing his jawline and the teeth I would need to sharpen. The smell was indescribable, but I had to push through. I had work to do. After a few more gruesome steps, I sharpened Mo's teeth, making them just the way he liked them. He checked them in the mirror, nodding with satisfaction. But then, as I turned my back for just a second, disaster struck. Mo pulled at my hair from behind, making sucking noises as he tugged each strand painfully from my scalp. Before I could react, Coco appeared, and with one swift blow using a ceramic tooth decoration, she knocked Mo to the ground. He didn't stop there. Mo apologized but made it clear he was still hungry, eyeing me like I was his next meal. He handed over the payment and I ushered him out of the practice. But the worst wasn't over. I watched, horrified, as Mo grabbed a drunken man outside the office. He latched onto the man's head, sucking his brain out like an oyster. There was nothing I could do. It was too late for the poor man. Mo consumed his brain with disturbing pleasure before turning back to me. "Thanks, Doc," he said. "I feel so much better now. I'll tell the beast you said hello." Then he was gone, disappearing into the night. Coco called the Paranormal Services emergency cleaners to deal with the body. This wasn't the first fatality I dealt with in my line of work, and my guilt was overwhelming. Today, I spent hours thinking about why I continue to risk my life for this job. In the end, it's simple. My fascination with monsters won't let me quit. Another monster for my research files, and I'm already looking forward to the next one, the old hag.